Hello and welcome to the Leaders Council podcast, the podcast for the people who run the country and the people who keep the country running. You join us on yet another sunny day here in an empty capital. I'm Matthew O'Neill, and today, as always, we ensure that we have a variety of distinct perspectives on leadership. First, we're joined by Diane Thompson, Group Chief Executive of Honeycomb Group, a non-profit organisation based in Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire, which provides support services to keep people safe and well at home. Diane, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming on the program. Now, normally I would go straight on to the subject of leadership, but considering the ongoing COVID-19 outbreak, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how is this affecting your operations?
Well, it's certainly been a challenge, but having said that, it's also, I think, created some opportunities for us as a group. I think the biggest thing was how quickly we made the change to ensure people were safe at home, whether we were working or we were working in front of customers still. So I think I was incredibly proud of how the business responded. But it is really strange. This is week 10 of nearly 300 staff, probably 200 working at home and 100 still working face-to-face with customers. So I think for us to mobilise all of that and get up and running in a new way has been pretty terrific, really. So you have to take the positives out of it. There's also lots of challenges still bubbling around until we can see where the future's taking us and plan for that. It's still quite challenging, I would say.
And how long did that transition take from office-based to home-based working?
We had pretty much everybody home-based within 2 weeks. So everybody was pretty much out of the office straight away, but getting people mobilised with the right equipment and making sure they've got Wi-Fi and all those sort of things working, we did all that within about 2 weeks. But a lot of the business was up and running within about 5 days from home. So it was pretty incredible. I think the hardest thing was where we have supported housing projects and how we then had to sort of introduce the social distancing and rotas with staff, so we had to reduce the number of staff supporting customers. That's been quite challenging, but 2 weeks really to get us all kind of functioning. And then you start to work on how you improve some of those things from a different location and a different way of working as well.
Now, of course, it must be a very different dynamic managing a team of, as you said, about 300 people, but not in the same place. What sort of management techniques have you had to employ to be able to keep all these staff motivated and on target?
I think that's a really, really good question as well. I think it has been very different. I think one of the things that we've tried to do is we put in place very quickly an interim engagement strategy for our staff. So we made sure that people had got access to things like MS Teams and Zoom, and people were WhatsApping each other before that was ready. So they created their own little hubs of teams and so they could keep in touch and support each other. And then we've done lots of things like we've created a group news. We've got that out every 4 weeks to tell the whole organisation what's going on. I personally took some responsibility to try and do things a little bit differently as well. And I rang all of our team leaders, all of our leadership team to see how they were doing, have they got the resources they needed, what were the obstacles, the barriers to doing their job effectively at home. And we've just generally tried to encourage people to let us know if something's not working, if they haven't got the right equipment. We've done things like deliver people's personal office chairs to them to make them feel comfortable and just try and make it the best we can. And I think the most recent thing we've done is we've done a bit of a pulse survey with staff of not what's working well for you, but how you're feeling about this, because we've got a raft of people with childcare challenges, their own mental well-being being challenged, not the right space to work at home. And then we've got people who are desperate to work in front of customers that are at high risk because they've had to so ventilate. So it's quite a complex situation, I think, for leaders, really complex.
Well, let's talk about when we transition back to the normal world. Do you think you'll ever fully go back to the way you were before?
I think that's, everybody keeps talking about this new normal, don't they? And I think what we're trying to do is reimagine how our services will be delivered whilst perhaps this virus still exists around us and we don't know, until there's probably the track and trace is working effectively, we won't ever be back to something that we have had in the past. So I think what we're doing now is we're reimagining how those services can be delivered safely. And I think what it'll do is it'll force us to do some things better and in a more efficient and way that supports flexibility for the way staff work as well. So I think there's been very positives from it. I think for us it'll be a balance between some people continuing to work at home and really making a massive change for us in that. And it may be that we think we probably will end up with a balance between the two, that will create some kind of hub, which is a centre for people to still connect with that face-to-face with their customers and with each other. I think what's come out of our survey is people miss that social connectivity, and it can't be underestimated. When you do that, you solve problems better, you bounce off each other. There's lots of real positives. So I think we'll be striving for a real balance on this, and not we're just going to be digital and we're just going to do everything remotely. That's just not who we are. We're people-centric. We need to be back in front of customers as well.
Well, we should move on to the subject of leadership. I always like to start this part of the conversation off by asking the same simple question. What does the word leader mean to you?
Okay, so the word leader for me, I think it means very much somebody who can create vision and then clarity around that vision that enables people to kind of come with you on a journey where you're very, very ambitious, determined and believing something. But you obviously need lots of people to be able to deliver around that vision, around that strategy. So it means for me, very much about someone that can bring people with you, inspire people, and really get people to buy into where you're trying to get to and what you're actually trying to achieve. I think if it can be understood like that, I think people can buy into that and really understand where they fit in.
And how would you describe your personal leadership style?
I think the leadership style I try to adopt is one that starts with openness and honesty. I think people need to see who you are to be able to build that trust and build that relationship. I think you have to be interested in people. It can't be about yourself and too much around egos. I think it's really important that you have that relationship of trust and you care about the people that work around you. So I try very much around collaboration. I try really hard to communicate with people in an open and honest way. I like to provide that clarity and that trust that people see the purpose of where we're trying to get to and what that means to the people that we serve, the customers and the communities that we exist for. If you can get those kind of messages across, I think leadership that's the sort of leadership that people are fairly comfortable with, I think.
Now, where did your leadership style come from? Where's its genesis? Did you have a role model early on your career who shaped you in this way?
I always think about role models as a really interesting question. There are iconic leaders out there that you always think, wow, that's amazing. People like Obama. But I think for me it's been a combination of things. Key influences, I think, not just any one person has defined my leadership style. I think it comes from staying relevant, being very self-aware, reading a lot. I love the work of Brené Brown. That's very much about your own vulnerability and about courage and being brave. I think I've studied around all sorts of things around professional qualifications to give you that support. But for me, it's very much inherent about being very self-aware, very open to learning, not think that you've made it in any way. I think there's been good and bad influences for me across my time. And you take those experiences and think, I want to do it that way. And you don't always get things right, but I think if you're open to challenge and to the most important thing about leadership for my style and the way I believe about it is getting the best out of other people. You cannot do everything yourself, and it is really important to build that confidence and the strengths of other people to go on and get things done.
Now, unfortunately, our time together has drawn to its close. The last grain of sand has fallen through the glass. But before I let you go, what does the next 12 months have in store for Honeycomb Group?
I think the next 12 months is going to be really interesting, but I think we have a lot of ambition in our strategy. We've just written a 5-year strategy that is about building more homes. It's about supporting more people who are probably on the more vulnerable side of society. We've got lots of plans to provide more supported housing. We're trying to work with communities to help their pathways and journeys into better education, better jobs, other things. So I think we will continue to plough on with those ambitions and manage the circumstances that we find ourselves in. But those desires and those ambitions do not go away for the Honeycomb Group, and we will be very determined to make sure that we are in this business to make changes and support people to have the best life they can have.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Diane, for coming on the program, and I'd love to have you back on when things get back to some semblance of normalcy to see how that transition is going. Diane, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
That was Diane Thompson, Group Chief Executive of the Honeycomb Group. And now, if you haven't heard it before, is Jonathan White's exclusive interview with Sir Geoff Hurst.
We're now joined, though, by former England footballer and still the only man to score a hat-trick in a World Cup final, Sir Geoff Hurst. Thank you very much for coming on today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Good afternoon.
And perhaps I should start and get it over and done with. I know you must be bored with it, and you've probably been asked 1,000 times. But when you got out for a duck playing for Essex, Geoff, what was going through your head at the time?
Well, of course, that's not one of the most asked questions I get. Oh, there are one or two people who are very familiar who do Google me, realise that I did score nothing for Essex. My only game for Essex first team when we played against Lancashire in Liverpool, a place called Egbert in Liverpool, many, many years ago, 1962, I think that was. So I didn't, I didn't really feel it at the time. It was lucky to be playing, I guess. There were one or two injuries. But the problem that I had was really messing about between the two sports. That was very detrimental to me over that period of time, being stuck between the two sports.
And I think for those that don't know, there's another world that might exist where Sir Geoff Hurst was a first-class cricketer and not perhaps a footballer. But whether it's business or cricket or football, obviously the importance of leadership, it can't be understated, no matter what form that comes in. When you were at West Ham, Geoff, and when Ron Greenwood first came along, he made obviously some pretty radical changes. Was this a man that genuinely inspired confidence the first time you'd meet him?
Absolutely. I mean, he was simply a fantastic coach or teacher, if you like, at football. And the quite always mentioned when we talk about Ron Greenwood, Harry Redknapp, who was played under him and has been very successful as a player and the manager over many, many, many years. He's come across many coaches, of course, and managers during his time over years, I guess. He would still say that Ron Greenwood is the best coach he'd worked with. So you're very fortunate. I think you think you're lucky when you come across, if you have a great teacher at school and a great coach, as we had in Ron Greenwood, and of course a great manager in Sir Alf Ramsey. So to come across people like that, of that calibre, can have a huge influence on your career, of course, and then your life. And that's quite purely the case.
Absolutely. And in those early days at West Ham, with a manager like Ron there, it's also important to have confidence with your other players, and of course they become your friends. Who did you look to at the time when to inspire confidence in yourself? Was it Peters?
I think probably. Well, I was very fortunate to play with the calibre of the players I did. Again, extremely fortunate to play with the captain of England and West Ham, and Martin Peters, who was a fantastic player. And as far as Martin's concerned, I think sometimes he didn't quite get the recognition he deserved and what a wonderful player he was. In terms of inspiring confidence, I always probably say that the biggest influence for me, I guess, would be the captain, Bob Noor. Although he was only about 8 months older than me, he graduated through the system probably 3 or 4 years earlier. He played for England in 62, 4 years before the final when I played. And so he was more, looked upon him more as a senior player, if you like, not as a guy with the same age group as me. And I looked at how he trained, how he acted, how he behaved, and how he played. And so he would say, I would also say he was a big influence on me. One thing I would say about leadership, what I do understand clearly in all walks of life, leadership is at the top, is absolutely vital for a business, a football team, in any walk of life to be successful. And it's quite evident. I was in the motor trade for a long time as well, selling car warranties to car dealerships. And you could almost tell when you walked into the business, many of the car dealerships, you could almost tell from the moment you walked in by initial reaction, people came and welcomed you, that the business was well run or conversely not well run at all. And so I understand the value and quality of leadership. And that's why I'm very fortunate to be involved in my career in those early days with two great leaders in Ron Greenwood and Alf Ramsey.
Absolutely. And since you've already brought him up, Jeff, I think it'd be remiss not to go a little bit further with that. But obviously, after at West Ham, your playing came to the attention of Sir Alf Ramsey. Now, there's a man I'm sure when you walked into a room, you knew who was in charge. When it came to managing that England team, what was his style like, Jeff?
Well, the first thing I say about Alf Ramsey, he's probably over my life the most powerful influence who had on me as a person. Naturally, it happens to an extent because he's got your whole career in his hand. Whether he picks you for England or he doesn't pick you, it can have a great impact on your career and, of course, your life. But in that era, I was involved for 6 or 7 years. It was quite clear who was the boss. He was quite very, very strict. Probably at a time, maybe overly strict, but at a time you probably wouldn't necessarily get away with it in today's football because it's changed dramatically in how you deal with players then and players now. But he was the most powerful man I came across, and very few people. And he was quite ruthless in getting people out who didn't want to be part of a group, part of a team. It is important that if you've got a group of people, and that's in any walk of life, they're all singing off the same hymn sheet, and you don't have anybody that's griping or moaning about the system. And if you've got people like that in your organisation, one thing I have learned, and I've taken it on in my life, my family, you've got somebody in the group that doesn't want to be part of it, you get them out. And Alf, I think, was quite ruthless with that in his staff. And I think that's one of the most serious things I think I've learnt over a long period of time.
And is there, do you think, a specific moment, I'm sure there's probably dozens, but is there a specific moment, if you could perhaps pick right now, that did show those qualities in Sir Alf so sharply?
Yes, I think for me, certainly, I think there are instances of players who you thought would be in the team or certainly in the squad, and surprisingly they were not. There was no necessary reason for it, but looking back, I do think perhaps they were people that Alf didn't think wanted to be part of a group. So that's for me. In terms of my personal view, I think that it looked prior to the World Cup that I was going to be playing in it only a few games before. I was playing, and I played with Jimmy Greaves in a game against Yugoslavia only a couple of months before the final. And it looked at that stage as if I was going to be playing in the team. But in a couple of more friendly games before the final in Poland and Norway, I think, and Denmark, I played 2 of the 4 games, and I probably didn't quite replicate my form that I'd been showing at West Ham and in the early couple of games for England. And he left me out in the first game of the World Cup against Uruguay. He started off with Jimmy Greaves and Roger Hunt. So I had an impact of thinking at that stage I looked like I was going to play, and didn't start because of just a lack of form. I didn't play quite well enough to justify my position. And somewhat fortuitously, I only got back in the team because of a nasty gash to shin on Jimmy Greaves' leg.
And I think what you've said there, Jeff, actually does sum that up really well. And more than that, whilst it's important to have that someone in charge with those qualities, it's almost useless if there isn't a strong and unified team behind them. And there really must have been moments, Jeff, maybe there weren't, but let us know, in that 66 competition, the prolonged pressure on all of you, the weight of a nation, did it get to you?
Well, not for me personally, no. I think, and I don't, not for me, not for a second. I think I was just happy to be involved in the squad initially. Not at all. You're not aware of the magnitude of the occasion, really, looking back out. So I never really felt. People talk about pressure a lot, and it's there, and players talk about it in life. I didn't really necessarily feel any great pressure during the time I was there. And what is also important to say about Alf Ramsey, the people he left behind that were left in the squad after he'd moved one or two players out, the squad were a bunch of very hard-nosed, professional, top-quality people. And that was, again, the leadership that Al showed. He got people in together that were very, very strong personally. And I think that was part of the success we had. We were I always describe our group as hard-nosed professionals. We have some great players, but overall they were great hard-nosed professional players and great quality people who we've kept in contact with, over the years.
And Jeff, I've got to ask, and I'm not making this up, I've genuinely heard that people do ask you whether or not you realise there were people on the pitch at that moment. I imagine you were busy on something else.
Well, I did some theatre shows last year. They've gone fairly well, and we're going to do a series of theatre shows, in fact, starting this week, over the next 2 or 3 months. And at the end of the theatre shows, we have about 20 minutes where we allow the people in the audience to ask questions. And I won't mention both. They're too long to talk about both questions. The other one's a really stupid one. It's too long for me to tell you. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the other ridiculous question I get asked, did I realise there were people on the pitch? And of course I jokingly say, yes, I was just about to shoot to score the goal. And I looked round, put my foot on the ball and looked round for a little while and said, oh dear, there are 6 or 7 people running on the pitch. So I've been asked that once at one of the theatre shows. So I make a joke about that and saying, yes, I put my foot on the ball and waited, just had a glance round,
Maybe it does prove there are things such as stupid questions, really.
Oh, yeah, there certainly are. I've got another one which I won't bore you into. It's too long to tell you. I was in a Jersey, or Channel Line, Jersey or Guernsey, 2 or 3 years ago, and most stupid, irrelevant questions, absolutely nothing to do with football whatsoever, which was absolutely, but I can use that now because it is quite funny. Well,
maybe another time then, but we...
well, you want me? I can tell you if you want. You got time? I can tell you if you want.
Jeff, go on. I think it would be silly if I said no at this point.
Okay, so I was doing at a dinner in the Channel Lines, 300 or 400 people, black tie dinner, guest of honour. On this occasion, I was speaking for about 20 minutes, then allowing questions from the audience at the end of the evening. And there was usual football questions, and then all of a sudden I had somebody at the back who asked a question. I didn't quite hear what he said. He didn't have the microphone with him, so I said, I didn't hear what he said. Can you please give this chap the microphone so I can hear clearly what he said? So the chap had the mic, and he said, when a turtle loses its shell, is it naked or is it homeless?
Right. What a question. What a question.
I think that would be definitely in the stupid category, wouldn't it? So we had a laugh about that.
You've got to have a patient of a saint, I think, sometimes to put up with things like that. But then again,
I found it amusing. I just found it amusing. In fact, some of the audience found it highly amusing as well. So it did make me laugh that day.
If you can put up with my questions, you can probably put up with anything. But there would have become a point, though, Jeff, I think you were a young man when obviously this happened, when you must have realised that teammates, began looking at you for leadership. Is that something that occurred to you, or did you just realise that by one way or the other, people actually begin to look up for you for inspiration?
Well, possibly. That's never really struck me until you've actually mentioned it now, quite frankly. That's a new question. Does anybody look up to me? I'm sure perhaps there are people who pay you compliments of fans of West Ham and Stoke, and of course England fans who I think probably it would be very immodest of me to to suggest that I felt that somebody was looking to me for inspiration.
You don't have to, but I will.
It's okay for a third party to do it. Perhaps that may have been the case over the years. People look at you and maybe it has a helpful effect. But I do think you how you behave and set examples on and off the pitch is people must realise that has an influence. How you react and behave to situations on and off the field surely probably has an impact to younger players coming into the team latterly.
And with that, looking at football today, is there anybody that you think, particularly on the field or the sidelines, that strikes you as someone with those qualities that you could identify in a natural leader?
Well, current players, you mean?
Oh, players, managers, anybody that you look to today, really?
Well, I think some of the outstanding. I think the best example about a leader at the moment is Klopp at Liverpool. He has been absolutely fantastic to acquire the players and get them to. Their attitude is absolutely fantastic. They're great players, but there's more than just being good players in football. It is have a good player with a fantastic attitude, and their willingness to work for each other and the team is absolutely outstanding. Hence these unbelievable results. There are, and the great players not always succeed as individuals, or probably even certainly as a team if you haven't got the right attitude alongside it. And they're probably, and that comes through the leadership. That's not just luck. That's absolute leadership. He'd be the best example, of course, in football terms today, easily. And of course, but going back not that long ago, Alex Ferguson is just absolutely. You've got to take him as the first example, because Klopp's only done this over a period of time, a short period of time. But if you look at the 26, 27 years that Alex Ferguson did with Manchester United, and subsequently since he's gone, how they are not doing so well. He's the best example of management we've probably ever seen, and I don't think anybody will see the like of that kind of leadership again. It's absolutely astonishing.
And do you think, could you imagine Sir Alf or even Ron Greenwood managing teams today?
Yes, I think so. I think yes, no question at all. I think Ron Greenwood. Yeah, well, the answer, straightforward answer is yes.
That's a good answer.
The straightforward answer is yes. I can elaborate as much as you want, but the straight answer is absolutely categorically yes.
And with and I know if we could talk about this probably for the next hour or so, but I'm conscious of the time. Looking back through your playing career, perhaps especially your time for England, who was it that struck you more than anyone else on the pitch that displayed qualities of not just leadership but companionship and level-headedness that you think that have stuck with you all these years later?
Well, I think I was very fortunate, and I wouldn't pick any one player out. I think looking at
so many,
and that's why we were successful, because we had so many showing all those qualities that you just mentioned throughout the team. I think that was outstanding, and it's an opportunity to talk about all of them in that breath. And there was nobody, and going back from an earlier question for me, all hard-nosed professionals, good teammates, good socially, and that's why we kept in touch with each other on our golf days every year up until about 5 years ago. Of course, with the sadly dwindling numbers, we still got on. Our wives got on all together all those years later. It didn't just finish after '66. That reunion, that camaraderie, that team spirit, getting on with each other lasted for a long time. And I wouldn't, when you put those questions and how you categorise those, I would pick every one of the 11 players who you put in that category that were like that. There was nobody else. They were all outstanding. And I think that was a big part. I can't stress how big a part that was. And I've said that many, many times for the success of the team. We have some great players. We have some great players, of course. But without the attitude alongside that, going back to an earlier question, we wouldn't have been as ultimately as successful.
Exactly. Without that, the whole will never be greater than the sum of its parts. But with it,
yes, the word is team. The word is team.
Absolutely.
And I always use the word team when I talk. Sometimes together, everyone achieves more, and that's the same in any walk of life. That's fundamental.
And lastly, Jeff, looking if you were to give advice, and whether this is in sport or business or indeed any other walk of life, what would you identify, if you can, as the key tenet that you can't go without in terms of leading a team, no matter what that team is?
Single-mindedness, dedication to the job, thinking about that role, that job in leadership all the time. It's a huge part of your life. I don't think you can switch off when you're in business at the top level or sport at the top level. You may, have a couple of weeks holiday, but I'm even sure if these top managers and leaders in all walks of life are away on holiday on a beach somewhere warm, I'm sure they will not switch off for 2 weeks and completely not think about their role as the boss of an organisation. And I think you're completely focused. You're always thinking about things, thinking about improvements, and it's just dedication and tuning your life to being successful.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, on that point, thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Very good nice to have a talk about this and just go over the past and just refresh my own memory about the quality of the players I grew up with.
Excellent. Another time, it would be great to talk again.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you.
This has been the Leaders Council podcast. Thank you for celebrating excellence in leadership with us. I have been your host, Matthew O'Neill. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast. The views expressed within the podcast do not reflect the views of the Leaders Council of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, its parent company or subsidiaries, members of staff, other guests, or any other person therein associated.